Hollister became a national authority and spokesperson for safer teen driving since losing his 17-year-old son, Reed, in a one-car crash in December 2006. After serving on a Connecticut task force that overhauled the state's teen driving laws, Tim launched From Reed's Dad, a national blog for parents of teen drivers. He has appeared on national and regional media, including Raising America on HLN. Tim was awarded the 2012 AAA Southern New England Traffic Safety Hero of the Year Award, as well as the U.S. Department of Transportation's National Public Service Award, the nation's highest civilian award for traffic safety. Gary Lapidus is director of the Injury Prevention Center at Connecticut Children's Medical Center. He's an associate professor of pediatrics and public health at the University of Connecticut School of Medicine. As a nationally known injury prevention scientist, Gary has conducted research to further our understanding of teen motor vehicle crashes. He's developed and implemented community safety programs and has advocated passage of Connecticut's graduated licensing laws for teen drivers. Tim and Gary will probably give us the hair-raising statistics regarding fatalities caused by teen driving crashes in this country. But I'm sure there are many people in this room tonight who've been touched in some way by teen driving fatality. Having lost my own father in 2005 in a car crash when a 19-year-old ran a red light, I'm extremely grateful to Tim for writing this book and to both he and Gary for being here tonight to speak to us. So please help me welcome them.
Well, good evening, everyone. I've been working in pediatrics for over 30 years, and one of the well-established practices in pediatrics is providing immunizations to children, vaccines to children. In fact, we start this practice in the newborn nursery. You may remember back when your sons and daughters were in the newborn nursery, the pediatrician would come to you and say, "Do we have your permission to give your baby hepatitis B vaccine?" And then, when they got a little older, at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, the doctor would again ask for your permission to provide vaccines to guard against diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus. They got a little older. This trend continued with measles, mumps, and rubella. And you probably, in your own head, did the cost-benefit analysis. Should I give my child this vaccine? The doctor says I should do it. It'll help guard against this disease. But there is some cost, right? It hurts. There's a syringe. There's a needle. Sometimes there's local effects like pain and temperature. But most of you, I imagine, made this calculation. When was the last time in the town of Simsbury you heard about a child coming down with diphtheria, or pertussis, or tetanus, or crippling polio? When was the last time in the town of Simsbury you heard about a teenager being involved in a motor vehicle crash? As it turns out, we have a vaccine for motor vehicle crashes. It's not a liquid that comes in a vial, and it's not administered with a syringe and a needle. It comes in a series of laws, a system called graduated driver licensing laws. And the information booklet is this book that Tim Hollister has written. If you read this book, it'll give you great information on how to keep your teenagers safe. This is what we see on our roadways. Smashed up cars. This is kinetic energy. You have the mass of the vehicle. Usually a vehicle, average car weighs about 4,000 pounds, traveling at 30, 40, 50 miles per hour. And then crashes into something. And the car gets deformed like that. And the people inside, as illustrated with this cartoon, all that energy has to go somewhere. And oftentimes it gets transmitted not only to the car gets crunched up, but the people inside. And this little cartoon depicts that some of that energy goes to the head, some to the chest, some to the torso. This is what we see at our Level 1 Pediatric Trauma Center, Connecticut Children's, and our Level 1 Adult Trauma Center at Hartford Hospital. Healthy people and within a second, they're all smashed up. You probably can't see it, but there's a bolt in this young man's head, measuring his intracranial pressure. He's got tubes everywhere. 1 second, he's a young tiger, strong. Second later, he's like this. This chart shows the leading causes of death in the United States. And across the top are age groups, less than 1, 1 to 4, 5 to 9. Down the side is rank, 1 through 10. The blue squares are unintentional injury. So you can see by looking at this chart that unintentional injuries are the leading cause of death for children, teenagers, and young adults. Not cancer, not heart disease, not some wild infection, not some crazy virus. Unintentional injuries. Sadly, the red squares are homicide, and the green squares are suicide. So injuries and violence are the leading public health problem among children and young adults in our country. Now, if you click on that blue square, this chart comes up. So among all unintentional injury deaths, and this is for people ages 15 to 24, in 1 year there were over 12,000 deaths. And of the 12,000 deaths, there were 7,000 or so due to car crashes. That's the lead at the top bar. Second is poisoning, 3,183, and drowning, 656. The poisoning is opioid poisoning. Oxycodone. This is essentially heroin in a pill. This chart shows what's going on. This is a crash risk by age. The first column is 16-year-olds, the second 17-year-olds, and then old people like me, 30 to 69. You can see the enormous difference in the crash rate among young 16-year-old new drivers. It goes down, even after 1 year, it goes down quite a bit, and then it gets to low levels among older people. Why? The brain, the part of the brain in particular, the prefrontal cortex that's right in the front, is not fully developed. This develops, and we'll hear more about this from Tim, in the mid-20s. This is a crucial part of our brain that focuses on and allows us to have some good judgment, and that's not developed. I just came back from a trip through Florida. I rented a car. Rental car companies won't rent to you if you're over 25. Actually, this one did. If you're between 21 and 24, you can, but you have a big premium. So they figured this out. The other big issue is inexperienced drivers. So young teenage drivers are inexperienced, and they're less proficient at scanning ahead. One of the things that an older driver has accomplished is his ability to look ahead and down a roadway and identify hazards and adjust to those. A new novice driver tends to focus on the perimeter of the car. They want to make sure they don't bump into it. They're also less adept at controlling the vehicle. And they also tend to have some behaviors that place them at higher risk, like speeding, like substance abuse, like lower seatbelt use. So already you have a high crash rate for the reasons I just explained, inexperience and risk-taking behaviors. And then there are two situations in particular that elevate the risk even more. And that's having other teenage passengers in the car and night driving. So this is a chart that gets at the passenger issue. This chart shows crash rates by driver age and passenger presence. And the first column there, which is like orange, is for 16 and 17-year-olds. The second column in red is for 18 and 19-year-olds. And then the yellow column there is for 30 to 59-year-olds. And then you have for 0 passengers in the car, in other words, just the driver themselves, 1 passenger, 2 passengers, and 3 passengers. So what's happening there is for the 16 and 17-year-olds, as they add each passenger, the crash rate goes much, much higher. You see the same pattern with 18 and 19-year-olds, but not as pronounced. Look what happens for older drivers. It actually goes down. It goes down because sometimes their children are in the car. And they want to be safe. Night driving, I mentioned. Night driving, as we'll hear again from Tim, is hard for all drivers, no matter what the age, but in particular for new teen drivers. So, as I mentioned at the outset, we have this system called graduated driver licensing. Way back in 1996, there was no system in place. If you are 16 years old, you can go to the Department of Motor Vehicles with mom or dad with certification like a birth certificate, right? With your feet, you would pass your driver's test, your road test, your written test, your vision test, and you got a driver's license, and you had full privilege driving. You could drive anytime, anywhere. And that was a recipe for disaster. We saw a lot of crashes. This system phases in the driving privileges and controls some of that risk. There's a learner's permit phase that allows driving only while supervised by an experienced driver. There's an intermediate phase that allows unsupervised driving with certain restrictions like a passenger restriction, a night curfew, and then a full license later on. Does this work? This is the vaccine I was mentioning before. Research in the United States, Canada, actually worldwide, has shown that this system works. It reduces car crashes 20 to 40%. The stronger the provisions, the greater the impact. So, for example, when we first passed our law in Connecticut, the night curfew started at 1 a.m. and ended at 5 a.m. That was okay, but not too many kids are out that late. Then it was midnight, now it's 11 p.m. There are some states where the night curfew starts at 9 p.m. That's a good thing, because it reduces exposure. And we've measured the impact in Connecticut. Basically what this shows is the impact over the 10 or so years, and we've seen a 40% drop in car crashes among 16-year-olds and a drop among 17-year-olds. So in conclusion, teens are at risk for motor vehicle crashes due to incomplete brain development, inexperience, risk-taking, and situational factors. Graduated driver licensing systems are very effective in reducing crashes, but it's the parent's role, key important role, in managing the new novice driver. The days of saying to your son or daughter, be careful, and crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. There's no way to do this. As we'll hear from Tim, you need an active parental role. I'm very pleased to introduce Tim Hollister, and he's going to explain and describe the contents of his terrific new book. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. This is our third stop on the Connecticut Library Tour, and it's been a great pleasure to work with Gary Lapidus. He is one of the consummate public health professionals in the state of Connecticut and the region. And one thing that hasn't been said so far is that tonight, Connecticut Children's Medical Center, with funds provided by Kohl's Stores, has donated 15 books to the town of Simsbury, which I'm sure will make good use of. Thank you to our hosts and organizers, especially Kathleen and Nicholas. And I need to say a very big and very public thank you to someone in the room, and that's Kurt Claracy of Claracy Consulting, which is here in Simsbury. Over the past 4 years, Kurt has created and maintained first my blog, and more recently the website for my book. And suffice it to say that I wouldn't be here and there would be no book if it weren't for Kurt. So Kurt, thank you very much. I have to tell you that presenting here in Simsbury feels like a little bit of a home game. I am related to the Jansons and the Safinos, and I worked with Mary Glassman more than 20 years ago before she was famous. So it's nice to be here. At the table in the back, the young lady who is related to me, she is my daughter, is selling books, $10 a copy, cash or check, and you're getting the author discount. But I bring this up at this point because it's important for me to know, to have you know, that the proceeds of the book are not going in my pocket. They will support my son's memorial fund, which is part of the endowment at the Asylum Hill Congregational Church. And the fund provides help with daycare costs to low-income families in Hartford. And the money will also support several national traffic safety programs. We don't know yet which ones those are because the book's only been out for a few weeks, but the money will go to good purposes. And so I'll pick up a copy. I've signed them all. I will stay afterwards and personalize any one that wants. And by the way, they make nice stocking stuffers. It may seem like I'm going to talk about my book, but really what I'm going to talk about is my life over the last 7 years. And my hope tonight, and for everybody watching, is that my lessons will become your lessons. We'll transfer some experience here, and we'll give you those lessons without having to go through what I have gone through with my family in order to learn those lessons. Let me introduce my son Reed. This was taken in the fall of 2005 when he was 16 years old, and I know what you're all thinking. Kind of a nice-looking young man. Well, the reason I can say that is that my wife and I adopted him when he was 11 weeks old, so he didn't get his good looks from me, obviously. But he got his driver's license in January of 2006 when he was 16 and a half. During the next 11 months, we had some issues. We had some discipline. There was one time when I not only confiscated the keys, but I took the car and hid it elsewhere in the neighborhood. But he drove crash-free. And meanwhile, during that time, I considered myself to be a hands-on, proactive, well-informed parent of a teen driver. I thought I had done everything I was supposed to do. I trained him in all the skills that are required by the motor vehicle manual and some more. You know, we did the typical thing that parents do Sunday morning in a big local parking lot. I assumed that driver's ed, he took driver's ed, and passing the state's test had produced a safe driver and that I could rely on him. So as the months went by, I gave him more and more freedom. As I say, I let the tether out in increments, and no news became good news. So that brings us to the night of December 1st, 2006. We lived in West Hartford, and I was on a business trip to Washington, D.C., and my wife was home in the neighborhood with friends a few doors away. Reed was at home with his sister watching a movie in the basement when my wife left. And at 9:25, Reed communicated with me using this brand new technology, something called a text message. This was in 2006. I think it was the first text message that I ever got. And the reason I think that is because before I had left for Washington that day, he taught me what a text message was. So there was a time in this world when there was no such thing as a text message. But the message was going to Mike's house. And it was a little late, but you all that have teenagers know that you have safe havens. And Mike's house was a safe place that we would let him go pretty much any time. However, the trip to Mike's house, which was in Wethersfield, ended up being a trip on Interstate 84 West, which is the opposite direction of Wethersfield, with two girls from our neighborhood as his passengers. And so this was, to use the phrase, a joyride. Teenagers in a car hanging out, no parents around, and none of the parents knew that the kids were in the car headed in that direction. I put this map up here. So, you know, West Hartford is sort of up where the word Connecticut is. So they're headed on 84 West, and they got off in Plainville. I'm sure all you know, it's the area around the Lowe's Theater. Mm-hmm. And if you've gotten off there, you know how confusing it is to get back on 84 East. And they got lost, and they ended up continuing on 84 West, going towards Southington and Cheshire. And now they were up against the passengers parent-imposed deadline of 10:30. So let me put all the factors together for you. A teen driver at night with passengers, unfamiliar road, needing to get home quickly. Formula for disaster. So they eventually turned around in Southington, sort of on the bottom of the screen here. And now they're on that long straightaway, 84 East. You go past the golf course on the right, and then there's that very sharp turn to the right, just before you get to the Tilcon facility on the hill up on the right there, where the speed limit goes from 65 to 50 in just a matter of feet. And Reed, probably over the speed limit to get his passengers home on time, went too far straight into the curve, overcorrected to the right, the way an inexperienced driver would, and did, I'll put this in motion here, 2 360s on the highway, and ended up spinning so that the driver's side door hit the butt of a guardrail right in the middle of the door, crushed the left side of his chest, and he died 5 hours later at Hartford Hospital. Now, no cell phone, no alcohol, no drugs. He was an hour and a half in front of the state's curfew, which at that time was midnight, and his passengers were legal at that time. He died of excessive speed and inexperience with how to handle the skid. Now, you'll notice, I'll point out two things about the crash. And by the way, taking my cue from the federal government, I always use the word crash to make the point that every event involving a motor vehicle could have been prevented. I don't like it when the traffic reporters talk about accidents, they're crashes. Small point. It says that Reed was not wearing his seatbelt. There was actually conflicting evidence about that, but this was one of those very rare crashes where a seatbelt probably would not have saved him because it was a side impact. There was it was a 1999 model car. There was no side airbag. But you know, the other thing, that the reality of these teen driver fatalities is, I saw the car about 5 days after the crash, and it was evident as soon as I looked at the car that had the impact been 18 inches forward or backward, he would have been injured, but he would not have been killed. So that's just one of those realities of the situation. This crash was, when you put it all together, kind of a perfect storm. One of my challenges in promoting Not So Fast and talking about teen driving is, many people think, oh, I don't have a teen driver in the house, it's not my problem. I beg to differ in this sense. There are 3 million new, in the United States, there are 3 million new teen drivers every year. There are about between 12 and 13 million drivers aged 15 to 20 in the United States. Their crash rates are 4 times. Gary talked about that safest group, age 35 to 49. 4 times that group. But the most important statistic to remember is that these teen drivers actually kill more others, their own passengers, other drivers, passengers in other cars, pedestrians and bystanders, than they do themselves. In round numbers, in the last couple of years, 2,000 teen drivers end up killing themselves and 3,000 other people. And I found in a terrific book called Traffic by Tom Vanderbilt, found a quote that kind of summarizes the problem. Nowhere else do we mingle so freely with others as when we're driving. Think about that. You go out on the road, you don't know who's behind you, in front of you, next to you, and you don't know if they're safe or if they're trained or what else. And here's another way to kind of get an understanding of the fact that teen driving really is a national public safety crisis. This is the relatively new website, the National Safety Council, which is in Illinois, called Drive It Home. The problem is that the teen driver fatalities, which get all the press, and injuries, which don't really get any attention, but they're more than 400,000 a year. They're a common daily occurrence, and they happen across 50 states, 24 hours, 365 days a year. They are local news. Next time there's a crash in this area that involves a teen fatality, if it's only one teen, I'll bet you it gets 1.5 inches in the local news section of Hartford County and nothing more. The point is that these crashes are so common that we just consider them another daily occurrence, perhaps the price of our mobile society. And so what you can do to get a better perspective on this, you see the lower right there, today's teen driving headlines. Just take 3 or 4 days and go on this website and look at, this is the headlines from one day, and your stomach will start to churn as you sort of get an idea of what's happening day by day across the country with teen driving, and that it really is a crisis. Let me go back now to my story. In 2006 in Connecticut, we had 49 teen driver-related fatalities. And then later in the year, and again, I'm sure many of you remember this, we had back-to-back multiple fatality crashes, one in Bristol, one in Walcott. The one in Walcott was a 17-year-old driver killed himself, his 15-year-old sister, and the sister's 14-year-old friend. So at that point, Governor Rell said enough is enough. She appointed a task force, appointed me as a parent, and our charge was do what needs to be done. So we had the full force of the governor's office behind us, and we had, our charge was make this better. Now, part of my wake-up call serving on the task force and the other members was as soon as people started to realize what we were doing, we started to get a lot of letters and a lot of emails. These are two actual emails that we got. I'll just read them out loud. While the intention is to reduce the incidence of horrific accidents that maim or kill multiple teens, the fact is that teens need to rely on each other for transportation, and these laws would cause a huge inconvenience. And then my personal favorite, the fact is that our children have to grow up, and to do that they have to make mistakes, and some of those mistakes will be made. So it kind of convinced us that we needed to do something. And it's important to understand, Gary talked about the graduated license program and its restrictions. What these laws are intended to do is take decisions out of the hands of parents. So if you're thinking, parents need to be able to make these decisions. I was at Conard High School in West Hartford the other day, and one of the people in the audience put it very well. These laws take the parent off the hook from being the heavy. You can't, honey, I'd love to let you drive, but the law says you can't. So that's really the purpose of these teen driver laws. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is just a quick summary of the major changes that we made. So I will just spotlight the last point on the first bullet. The 2-hour parent class has been now in existence for almost 5 years. And what it says is when a teen is getting a learner's permit, he or she has to go with mom or dad or a guardian to the driving school to sit for 2 hours to learn about teen driver safety and the laws. And as you can imagine, at the legislature there was a lot of pushback, a lot of concern. I think I can say now it's just part of the landscape, an accepted part. And I think the other thing that makes us who served on the task force feel better is if I now had a nickel and the other task force members and the legislators, parents thanking us for the 2-hour class. We are the only state in the country that has this mandatory 2-hour class. And when I go around the country, I say, try it. It's not as bad as you think. But it's been a great improvement. You would hope that parents would think the 2 hours was worth it to learn about their child's safety. But we have now a 40% reduction in crash rates from those mid-2000 years, based on our overhaul of the teen driver laws. I mentioned my blog. Here's how I got there. Serving on the task force really opened my eyes. I got a re-education in the dangers of teen driving, and I found out that in 2006 I had not been a well-informed parent as I thought. And more specifically, I concluded that most of the literature available to parents, and after the task force was done, I continued on for about 18 months just trying to do my homework. Most of the literature makes the assumption that teens will start driving on the first day that they're legally eligible, that 16th birthday here. It's 14, 15 in many states, especially in the Midwest. But that a parent's job, sometimes a parent's only job, is to teach a teen how to drive a car. And so what the literature doesn't do is it doesn't explain why teen driving is so dangerous. And most importantly, it doesn't explain what parents can do day by day before their teens get behind the wheel to prevent the very predictable, very dangerous situations that end up in crashes. So that became the focus of my work. And with Kurt's help, I started the blog in the fall of 2009. And I'm proud to say that after some somewhat meager beginnings, we last month cracked 17,000 visitors, which I always say for a dad with a keyboard is pretty good. And Kurt has set a goal for me of 20,000 in a couple months, and I think we'll get there. But out of this work, I ended up with what really the focus of the book is my pet peeves. So let me just take a few minutes to tell you my pet peeves, and then we can get into some questions. And this is what has become my mantra. There is no such thing as a safe teen driver. Now, is it fair for me to paint all teens with the same brush? Yes. And the first reason, the most important reason is the human brain is not fully developed until we reach about age 22 to 25. And the last part of the brain that develops is the part that provides judgment and restraint. And this is both a matter of the wiring, the physical development of that prefrontal cortex. It's a matter of chemical imbalance. There are chemicals called neurotransmitters. Dopamine, which is a stimulant often used to treat ADHD kids, and serotonin, which you all know is a sleep aid. In the teen brain, the dopamine is up here and the serotonin is down here. The colloquial expression is that's why teens are more gas than brake. So it's not until we get into our mid-20s that it starts to even off. Number two, good driving with judgment requires 3 to 5 years of experience. Think about that in comparison to the 40 hours that we require, which sounds like a lot until you compare it to this statistic. 40 hours that we require to put a teen on the road with a license. Number three, a teen's mission in life is to not hit anything with the car. It takes a long time to drive enough so that you have a sense of where the car is on the road without looking at the perimeter. That allows you to look down the road and see the developing traffic situation, and that's how you avoid crashes. And finally, and this is one that I think gets overlooked a lot, we train our new drivers in compact cars on familiar local streets here in their hometown, and then they drive SUVs, high-performance vehicles on the Mass Pike at rush hour by themselves. And so they are learning to drive and navigate at the same time. Think about yourself as adult drivers. You go to a new city, you rent a car, you're looking up at the street signs, trying to figure out where you're going without hitting anything. Well, combine that with learning to drive at the same time, and you start to get a sense of how challenging it is. What do I advocate is the attitude that parents should have, and I think it starts with treating driving like flying. And I actually got sort of an assist from Deborah Hersman, the chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board, who said this on TV not long ago. You wouldn't toss the keys to an airplane to a pilot and say, be careful. And you shouldn't do that with it, especially with a new driver. What you want to do with a new driver is every time they get behind the wheel, make it clear, this is a big deal. You are about to do something momentous and dangerous. And you not only need to be ready to drive physically and mentally, but we're going to go through the safety checklist. Where are you going? What's the route? And do you know the route? What's the timetable? Is your equipment ready for this drive? And so on. Contingency plan, so that the car does not leave until you, the air traffic controller, clear the car for takeoff. So that's a good way to think about the level of care. Driver's ed is absolutely essential because obviously teens need to know the rules of the road and they need to know how to handle the car. But the counterweight to that is you should not think for a moment that a graduate of driver's ed is a safe driver, because there's basically no evidence to support that. A graduate of driver's ed has the basic knowledge to get a license. That's why we have driver's ed, so we have to ask for a driver's test, but it doesn't create a safe driver. So that's something just to not fool yourself as to what you're really doing. In round numbers, the risk of a new driver getting in a fatality is about 1 in 4,300. Risk of injury is about 1 in 30, just round numbers. But these are the factors that, to use the phrase, spike the punch bowl. Impaired driving, distracted driving, which I'll come to in a minute, speeding, fatigue, which is the hardest thing for parents to monitor because it changes at least every day, sometimes in a matter of hours. But drowsy driving, I think, is one of the underappreciated dangers. And then all these other factors, and when you get them in combination, you take these average numbers that I gave you, and they start approaching almost a near certainty that there's going to be a crash. Much of what I talk about on the blog and in the book is attempting to raise awareness. And this is a point that I think is just below the surface of consciousness for the parent. And that when I bring it up, parents have kind of an aha moment. Purposeful driving versus recreational joyriding. A team with a destination, a reason to arrive safely, and a route and arrival time. They're going to sports practice or a job or a medical appointment. They're going to drive conservatively and slowly, and they're going to get there. It's the joyriding where we see the problems. And we know this from this past summer in central Connecticut. We had 8 teen driver-related fatalities between May and August. You could easily characterize 6 of those deaths as the result of the joyride. So it's the joyriding where we see the risk-taking and the misconduct that causes crashes. Teen drivers with teen passengers. It's important that parents recognize that every additional passenger in the car increases the crash risk. AAA Foundation put out a study recently analyzing 10,000 teen driver fatalities where they had passengers, which is just a mind-boggling statistic in itself. This is over a period of 5 years. But one thing that jumped out from that study is that 70% of the drivers were boys. So not that the girls get off scot-free here, but this is one area in which the boys are definitely more the risk factor than the girls. Now the other thing that's important about passengers is most of the graduated driver laws in the United States allow siblings to be passengers several months earlier than they allow non-family members. There is no, is that based on any evidence? Absolutely not. You think about who is your teen most likely to fight with, younger brother, younger sister, but the siblings are not less risky. The reason for the difference is just it's always been that way, and there's no safety evidence to support it. And next time you're thinking about having your teen driver drive younger brother or younger sister somewhere, keep in mind the words of Dave Preußer, who is a prominent national traffic safety researcher from Trumbull, who says, do you want to put your most important cargo in the hands of your least experienced driver? And that's a good way to think about it. Most dangerous times, the one that parents don't think about is immediately after school. And Friday, Saturday, late night, that's obviously going to be a time of danger, but immediately after school, the school parking lot is ground zero. That's where you get multiple teens in the car, perhaps on a joyride, and across the country we've seen just an incredible number of crashes and fatalities, kids leaving school, including the Bristol crash that I talked about earlier. The other thing is summer. Why? Because that's when you get the joyrides. 60% of the crashes and fatalities are in that 4-month period between May and August, so it starts with prom season and goes from there. I could talk about texting and electronic distraction for many hours, so I'm just going to give you the really short version here. Texting is driving blindly. The 3 steps to avoid a crash are to perceive the danger, to take action, and then slow or redirect the vehicle. The average text message takes 5 seconds. At 60 miles an hour, that the car goes about a football field and a half. Texting eliminates reaction time. For teen drivers, what I advocate is zero tolerance. Easier said than done. But what I mean by that is the cell phone goes in the glove box before the car is turned on, and it does not come out until the car is turned off. That's what I mean by zero tolerance. Now, another way to go at this is to have a clear and simple rule. Frankly, across the country, including in Connecticut, our electronic distraction laws are very complicated. They go on for pages with definitions and exceptions and all kinds of stuff. But what you want to do is have a teen driver agreement, and I talk about those in the book, with a simple sentence that says what the rules are. What I suggest is no driver of a vehicle in motion shall use an electronic device to text, type, read, watch a video, or make a phone call. And notice electronic device, not cell phone, because now we have all these dashboard-mounted internet interactive screens that you can push buttons, you can read your restaurant while you're driving. So it's not just cell phones. But now I have to call a foul on myself here. Did anybody see over this past weekend the NBC News report about kids taking selfies, pictures of themselves with their cell phone while they're driving? Silly me, I should have said, or take a photo. GPS. GPS is legal for a teen driver. You might say, well, it's just navigation, but here's why I think they're not a good idea. Number one is GPSs are not infallible, as you know. Perhaps the only thing worse than a teen driver is a lost teen driver. But I really worry that when a GPS gives a voice command that says turn left here, that the teen brain says, oh, it must be safe to turn here because the GPS just told me so. Obviously, GPSs are directional, they're not safe. Last thing, again, we're trying to bring out things that we don't think about. Headphones and earbuds. Hearing is part of your safety equipment, and if your hearing is blocked, you're not going to be able to hear the siren, the screech, the whatever behind you. So I ask that the teen drivers not wear headphones. Okay, here's a real pet peeve. Most high schools in the United States, over the summer, before school resumes, send out a form that says, it asks parents for 3 types of permission. Number 1, I allow my teen to drive to and from school. Number 2, I allow my teen to be a passenger of other teen drivers to and from school events. And number 3, I allow my teen to drive other students to and from school events. Well, if you've heard what I've said so far about teens and the passengers, even at school events, these forms are a really bad idea. They sanction a very unsafe practice. More importantly, they may give the impression, they often do give the impression, that the state's passenger laws don't apply to school events, which is not true. And parents don't realize that they are, because it's a school event, that their teens are getting in the car with a inexperienced teen driver whose ability and experience that they don't know. So these forms, I would urge Simsbury High School and the other school to take a look at your form and make sure that you're not doing something dangerous inadvertently. I spent about 6 months in 2010 in my day job. I'm a lawyer. I know a little bit about contracts. I read about 100 different teen driver contracts, and I tried to identify what were the good practices and what were the bad practices. And I came up with a national model. Connecticut now has, on the DMV website, a very good model, which we kind of interacted and traded best practices. But what I tried to do in my model is, number 1, put the cautions that I talked about right there up front. And then it's in an area where safety risks get talked about between the parent and the teen and initial, so everybody understands what we're doing. And then clear rules. One of the things that drove me nuts about reading through these 100 models are sentences like, if I violate the law, I may lose my privileges. Well, that's like saying, if I buy your house, I may pay you. Well, it's a contract. You got to come up with clear rules. So I try to cover all the major safety factors and then end with a mutual commitment of teen driver and parent and guardian committing themselves to safety. And the point of a teen driving agreement is to settle what the rules are going to be in the calm across the kitchen table, and not when your teen comes home with a violation in his or her hand. Okay, I'm going to end with a little quiz here. See how you do. Parents say to me, well, Tim, I read your book, I've read your blog, there's so much information. Where do I start? So I came up with a little, I think it's called a mnemonic, PACTS. So these are the 5 dangers that if you as a parent get your hands around, you'll be doing very well. So what do you think P, what's P stand for as a teen driver danger? Passengers. A is something we actually didn't talk about too much, but A is alcohol and drugs, impaired driving. C, curfew, night drive. T, if you don't get T, I'm gonna leave right now. Texting. And then finally, S is seatbelts. It's a nice simple formula. If you can start with these, you'll be well on your way. So let me, as a last measure, I'm going to ask to deputize all of you. The book was released on September 1st by the Chicago Review Press. I'm very honored to work with them, and it's been selling very well. I told you about the proceeds, but there are 12 million teen driver families out there in the United States, and it's just me. I'm not a corporation. I'm not a promotion company. So I will just say that I would gladly accept any help that you can give me in whether it's your Facebook page or your Christmas list or whatever. Just put the word out, especially outside Connecticut. We're doing pretty well in Connecticut, but it's the rest of the country that it's going to be a long uphill slog to try to reach those 12 million families that have teen drivers. So the book website is www.nsf, as in not so fast, nsfteendraving.com. The blog is www.fromreads.org. And I very much appreciate your coming. I hope this has been educational and helpful. And I think Catherine, we have some time for questions.
Does anybody have questions?
Yeah, hi, my name is Liz Satilli. I had a son that just turned 16 last week.
You're in the zone.
Yeah, and I always thought he was going to be one of those kids that would be, take me right down to get my permit. And he said, Ma, I don't think I'm ready to get it yet. I'm too busy, and I think I don't know what, but I'm thrilled.
You should be.
So you talked about the difference between 16 and 17. Is that something that physiologically changes in that year's time? Like, is it to wait to 17? Are you gaining? Or is it just that that the experience is there and that's why it drops?
Yeah, I'll start, but I'll bring Gary up because he's the public health expert. Yes, any older age, 16 is a pretty risky age, just in general. 17 is a little better, but it's not a guarantee. The older they get, the more the brain has developed. So, older is better, but I'm not going to say that 17 is the magic age at which every teen should go forward and drop.
I just absolutely concur with that advice. I think 17 is better, older is better, but again, the clock starts when you begin this process. So all the things that Tim talked about, if it starts at 16, it should start at 16. If it starts at 17 or 18, same thing.
I do need to tell you this one story. When we were serving on the task force, I told you we got letters from all over the state. A high school teacher in Litchfield told his class, there's some people in Hartford that are doing some things that are going to affect you. You should write to them and tell them what you think. So we got a handwritten letter from two 14-year-old boys that said, if you make the driving age 14, we'll have 2 years of experience by the time we get to 16. Those boys are now in college, and I bet they're on their way to making it. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
One
We
question.
have a microphone here, maybe.
Yeah, oh, okay. Or I can talk loud. So with curfews, I'm a little torn on that. I understand the idea of the curfew because of the night driving and also get into trouble when it's hours they shouldn't really be out. But then again, the issue of racing back to get home in time for the curfew. So that's what I'm asking. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the question is curfews and the problem of racing home to get back before the curfew. Exactly one of the things that I talk about in the book.
Right.
Curfews require planning, including on the return trip to make sure that they leave in time. If they're going to be late, and they know they're going to be late, that they pull over and call you on their cell phone, pull over, not when they're driving. But you're absolutely right. That's one of the dangers of curfews. Now, remember, that's going to be a problem whether the curfew is 9, 10, 11, 12, 1 in the morning. It's always going to be a problem. But you're absolutely right that curfews require some planning to make sure that there's a comfortable margin for them to get back home and meet the state's law. When I talk about curfews, I say that our curfew law in Connecticut and most of the ones around the country have exceptions. If you have the curfew is 11. If you're going to be at school working on a play till midnight, it's tech week before the play, put a letter from your director in the glove box. So if you're stopped by law enforcement at midnight and you're on a fairly direct line between the school and your house, show them the letter. You should be fine because we have that exception built into the law. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're 3 towns away, don't even try it. But the point is that curfew is a system that has a beneficial purpose and it can be planned to make it safe for everyone. That's a good question. Thank you.
I have a quick question about when you see a young driver, and through my experiences at Simsbury High School, saw several 16-year-olds pile kids into their car when they're leaving school. And my question is, we've all heard the saying, if you see something, say something. But as a parent, I never wanted to call the parent and say, did you know Susie was piling 6 kids into her car? Is there any way we can get the principal to be the bad guy so that the parent called the principal and said, I observed Susie putting 6 kids in her car. I know she just got her license. What do you do as a parent?
Yeah, that's a great question. The question is, what do you do as a parent if you see your child or somebody else's teen violating the law and doing something dangerous? And I think one thing you touched on that's absolutely correct. If you can get it to the parent anonymously, that's certainly one way to do it. I actually have a section in the book where I talk about this. It takes a village. I try to tell parents the worst thing you can do is ignore it and be afraid to bring it up. But there are risks if you call on the phone. Well, who appointed you, God, or community overseer? I mean, that is a risk. We all know the risks of electronic communication. You can send that parent an email, and who knows where it's going to end up. So I think phone calls actually, or a visit to the door, might be the best thing to do.
But these also are the parents that are letting
Oh, yeah.
their kids drive other kids. And, oh, the law, it doesn't apply to us.
No, I know.
The law's there for a reason, it's the parents.
There's no easy answer. Actually, in the book, I have a suggested script as to what you can say. You know, I hope you'll take my phone call. I hope you understand the reason I'm bringing this up. Your son or daughter is just such a wonderful young lady or young man, but I saw him doing something and I thought you'd want to know about it. The same way I would like you to tell me if you saw my son doing it. So I'm try to
Maybe deliver the book.
maybe deliver the book.
Deliver the book.
But, you know, it's so hard, but it's so necessary. The worst thing you can do is just look the other way and say, it's not my problem.
I've done it many times, and I
We
feel
all,
awful
we all, we
now.
all. Sir,
How would you train a new driver getting caught out in a snowstorm? You know what it's like when your first time you experience driving in the snow, you hit your brakes, and you accelerate faster. You know, besides taking him in a parking lot, an unplowed parking lot, and showing him how to, when the car spins, how to steer out of it, or does that make it like, wow, this was really fun? Watch what my dad showed me to do. You know, how do you teach you know, how does he get experience to drive?
you know, the question is, how do you get experience driving in conditions like snow? Let me be totally candid. You're now talking about actually driving a car, which is a little bit beyond my expertise. One of the weird things about my book, Not So Fast, is there's nothing about driving. I'm not a driving instructor. I'm a parent who's done homework about things you can do before you get in the car. Having said that, I will say that what you bring up is the same risk of sending your teen to a high-performance driving school. Okay, maybe, I mean, think about my own son. You know, if I had sent him to a high-performance driving school to learn how to handle a skid, would he have done better when he actually went into a skid? Well, yeah, but would he also have driven faster in some instances that would get him into trouble? Because, oh yeah, well, if I skid, I can handle it. All of these things are two-edged swords, and that's simply the reality. You know, where do I come down ultimately? I suppose more experience is better unless you know your team better than anybody else, unless you think your team is going to take that experience and use it to take a risk that they shouldn't. So, you know, every team is different. Gary?
Let me comment on it, because I have talked to driving instructors about this. And the advice that they've given me is the following. You want to be in the car with your son or daughter under all sorts of conditions, right? Daylight driving, no traffic. You want to be with your son or daughter in a parking lot with a lot of traffic. You want to be with your son or daughter when it's heavy rain and when it's snowing out. So when my kids were learning to drive and it was snowing out, I said, come on in, let's go, we're going out for a drive. Well, you're crazy, you know. It's important for her to be with somebody to get that experience, as opposed to being somewhere for the first time, never having that experience. So it's recommended that, again, with you in the car, they get experience on all conditions. Night, day, good weather, adverse conditions, etc.
I have another question. Can you go back to that, the form you got from school? Okay, so you get these forms home, and what do? So you just make the decision not to sign them? I mean, are all parents letting their kids do this, and you're gonna be the only parent that doesn't allow that?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. The question is, what if you're concerned about form and what do you do about it? Number one is, I would hope that you and other parents would go back to your high school look at the form and see whether it needs to be changed. You may be playing with fire here because they made the school transportation system, school budgets are always under pressure. They may count on student drivers to spare them the expense of having to hire a bus. So this may have practical implications. But let me tell you a story. I just posted a guest blog on this very topic. I got a call from a mother in, I'll just say, a suburban location on the East Coast. Her daughter is a 16-year-old athlete, captain of a team in that particular school, public high school. They don't even ask permission. They've just been a long-standing part of their transportation system. She's very concerned that her daughter is being forced into unsafe situations, but she's afraid if she brings it up to the school, that the school will say, okay, the answer is your daughter can't be on the team. So this school is setting up this mother to choose for her daughters participation in sports or safety in cars. I mean, that's just an unbelievable thing to do. So there is no easy answer, but I think the starting point is to make sure that the school is not inadvertently giving parents the impression. I mean, first of all, the school ought to make sure parents understand what they're doing. The form should say, you understand that we are asking your permission to allow your son or daughter to be a passenger or a driver with other team passengers. So just disclosure is part of the issue here. Second is make sure that everybody understands that any driver has to be able to do that under state law, which in Connecticut means they've had their license for at least a year. Start with those two things, at least you're ahead of where you are today. But again, this is another one of those areas where there are no easy answers.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Can I
ma'am.
offer another option to
Sure,
that? Is
absolutely.
maybe going to your school and offering, add a selection where, would you be willing to be an adult chaperone
Absolutely.
for carpooling?
Sure.
Oh, Simsbury, we all carpool anyways. I mean, it gets less in high school, but obviously, it's, once a week, once a month. I think most parents, just put it as an option.
Yeah.
There's always another answer.
Very, very good suggestion. Thank you.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.